All right, everybody, Harry here. So today we're going to be talking about something pretty fun. We're going to be talking about Pokemon, the franchise. So pretty much what is very interesting about the franchise is that the franchise released in Japan with the copies of Red and Green, right? So Red and Green were mildly popular. They sparked a couple of toys. They sparked a couple of card games, just like these vintage Pokemon cards. And what eventually ended up happening is they turned it into a global franchise. And the way they turned it into a global franchise was through basic marketing and also through animation. Because the Pokemon anime became extremely popular and they ended up branching off into things like trading cards and other realms. Now, when the Pokemon franchise came to the West, they partnered with Wizards of the Coast and ended up making the actual traditional Pokemon cards that we know. Nah, I'm just kidding. Not these. These are garbage. These cards they started making. And they eventually got to the point to where Pokemon became so popular they started making spin-off games. So stuff like Pokemon Snap. They started going past their traditional two-game system and they started doing a third game, which is how you got Yellow, Crystal, and all of these in-betweens. And they started doing what we would consider promo cards and everything. Like these came out with the Pokemon movie. These came out in the Pokemon movie VHS tape. Pretty much the hype was real. So real that this card right here became so infamous and so expensive that people were getting stabbed on the playground. Now, if you lived through the original Pokemon craze, you know how bad it was. It was insane. Pokemon was everywhere. Everyone had a copy of some kind of game. And everyone had the toys. Everyone had the cards. Like, it was legit. It was like the first global phenomenon. Like, the really first global one before anything else really took off. And it literally opened up the West to a lot of Japanese animation and Japanese properties because Western audiences saw the profit that could be made. And matter of fact, South Park did an episode making fun of Pokemon because they saw how crazy it was. And they didn't even have kids. And it's interesting because like what we're going to talk about is Pokemon as a whole kind of fizzled out. So you had the original hype, which lasted up until Silver and Gold for sure, sort of kind of into Ruby and Sapphire. That's where a lot of people dropped off. And then after Ruby and Sapphire, like the Diamond and Pearl, like it was gone kind of thing. And we still had your occasional spin-offs. They started doing remakes. Like they started making Leaf Green and Fire Red. And they started to try to capitalize on the older market. But for the most part, Pokemon almost completely fizzled out. The show wasn't really doing good ratings anymore. The cards weren't really selling well anymore. They tried gimmicks to try to get people to buy. So the card game, they started doing the slider cards, kind of like what you see in Digimon Season 3. Like, yeah, this is different. But Pokemon still trekked along. Like Nintendo and Game Freak still did what they did to make sure the franchise was popular. And they even went as far as they still continued the manga, because the manga was ongoing since the beginning, and it just kept going through the other seasons. They never canceled. They just kept doing it, kept doing it, kept doing it. Same thing with the cards, same thing with the games. So it was on the down low. It wasn't really popular, but it was still selling enough to where Nintendo and Game Freak thought it was profitable and to keep it around, which is good. That's good because what ended up happening was completely unexpected for a lot of us. So this was around the time that Sun and Moon came out. Sun and Moon was considered it was kind of like their big like send off for the Nintendo 3DS. So everything between the DS and the 3DS was kind of mostly forgotten. A lot of people never played them. And when it got to the Sun and Moon games, they did good enough to where they decided to do an expansion again. And instead of doing a single expansion, they did a double expansion, which is Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. And then they did something very, very nostalgic. They brought back Team Rocket, who were the villains from the original games. And it's who a lot of people remember from the cartoons. And it had some hype. Like, a lot of people were like, oh, yeah, yeah, Team Rocket, let's do it, like, but it wasn't anything that Game Freak would have, really wanted. It wasn't like the numbers they were looking for. Well, then came something that completely blew up everything. Well, two things. First thing was that they released Pokemon Go. Pokemon Go brought Pokemon back to normal people. Everyday people saw Pokemon all over again, and it started off with Kanto, which is the first games. So that really dragged a lot of people in. And Pokemon Go happened in three waves. You had the initial wave, which is a lot of the hype, a lot of the traffic jams, a lot of people walking around in groups of 40 in the park. Like that all came with the first wave of Pokemon Go. The second wave was when they released the Silver and Gold Pokemon, Generation 2, and people came back in because Pokemon Go was going for about a year with nothing really going for it, and then that happened, and then people started getting back into it again. And then the third wave is when, like, everything else started falling into place. So what I mean by that is that Pokemon started to gain the original popularity back because a lot of the original fans were coming back in because of Pokemon Go. But a lot of new fans started coming back in when Logan Paul announced he was a Pokemon fan. And the way he announced he was a Pokemon fan was he started talking about Pokemon on his stuff, and he started carrying around rare cards on his person, and him and his buddies were openly talking about Pokemon. Now, if you don't know who Logan Paul is, bless you, because that's amazing. But he is a influencer who is in his, I think, early 30s now. Either late 20s or early 30s, one of those two. But now he's in the WWE. He's a millionaire. He also has, he has his own energy brand. I keep wanting to call it Cred because that's what South Park keeps calling it. But it's Prime. It, not to be confused with Optimus, not to be confused with Amazon. It's just called Prime. That's the name of the drink. And he's been a very successful entrepreneur. And when he went into the Pokemon craze, that's when a lot of people started getting into the Pokemon craze. And cards like this started shooting up in value. So I bought this card probably about 6 months before Logan Paul made his Pokemon fan announcement, and I paid $30 for this. This card is worth about $700 now, just because of Logan Paul. And it's really interesting because Pokemon as a franchise has made a massive comeback. And you will find people at your work or at your school playing Pokemon. You'll have them playing Pokemon Go. You'll have them talking about the games. Like, they got the new Pokemon game coming out, the new Legends, and it's crazy. It's really interesting. It's still not back to its original hype. The original hype was insane. It was jaw dropping with the amount of money that was being tossed around. But it's getting there. It's getting there. Like, it's I'd probably say it's about 3/4 to what it was originally. Like, it's to the point to where GameStop's selling Pokemon cards now. GameStop is starting to PSA cards, which is the grading system you got to use to grade your cards, and it's how cards end up maintaining and surpassing value. So GameStop started doing that. And a lot of people take Pokemon more as a serious commodity. You will find cards like this sell for thousands of dollars because Pokemon collectors are real. Like, rich people are really into it nowadays. So it's really interesting to see that Pokemon Go and Logan Paul together saved the franchise somehow to where Game Freak really couldn't. And it's really sad because the last couple of Game Freak games have not been good. Ever since they switched over to the Switch, it's not been a good franchise. It's been mediocre, but it's also led in popularity to where we've gotten things like the new Pokemon Snap, which we never would have thought we would have got. Because this hasn't happened since the Nintendo 64, and that's like 1999 or 2000 or something like that. But we got a new Pokemon Snap. We got new trading cards. They finally matched the borders with the Japanese cards. Like, they're doing all kinds of interesting things that's happening in the Pokemon world. So it's really interesting to see it all play out. So if you're a Pokemon fan and you haven't gotten back into it, just look into it, see if you like it. And come be amazed with all of these changes they've made, just like me.